Close your eyes for a second and go back with me in time. London, 1666. The streets are silent. The candles go out. The city sleeps convinced that tomorrow will be just another ordinary day. This video is a historical recreation of the 10 minutes before the moment the story decided to act. Nothing has exploded yet. Nothing is out of control, and that's exactly what makes it all the more disturbing. Stay here, because when those minutes are up, you'll understand how the story begins, always, in silence. London, late summer of 1666. The night comes unhurriedly, like so many others before it. There is no rush, there is no alarm, there is no sense of urgency in the air. On the contrary, there is an almost deceptive comfort in that routine that has been repeated for years. The streets are narrow, irregular, too cramped for the number of houses that have grown on top of each other over time. Wooden buildings lean against each other as if seeking mutual support, creating deep shadows, even in the dim light of the lanterns. Small flames flicker in the windows, illuminating modest interiors where families wrap up another ordinary day. Doors close slowly. Locks are placed carefully. Someone blows out the candle before bed and thinks quickly about the next morning's work. Another adjusts the straw on the bed and turns to the side, convinced that he will wake up with the same scenario as always. The air carries a familiar smell, freshly baked bread that still comes from bakeries, old. Smoke that never leaves the city, wood warmed by the sun of a dry summer. None of this seems strange. London has always smelled this way. London has always lived like this. Outside, the River Thames follows its slow course, reflecting lights that stretch over the dark water. Boats bob gently, tethered, motionless, as if the river itself were respecting the silence of that night. There is no visible omen. There is no tension on the face of those who pass by. There's just tiredness and normality. This is the most dangerous detail of all, because when a city believes too much in the repetition of its days, it fails to realize how fragile everything around it is. Houses creak discreetly with the change in temperature. Wooden roofs crackle almost imperceptibly. Chimneys still exude heat even after low heat, but no one pays attention to these sounds. They are part of life. They always have. Somewhere in the city, someone thinks they should fix something at home. In another, someone decides to leave it for later. Tomorrow there is time, it always did. London is ancient, resistant, surviving. That's what everyone believes. And so, little by little, the city falls asleep, not as a place on alert, but as a place overconfident in its own permanence. The most disturbing thing is to realize that, at this exact moment, there is no evident human error. There is no absurd decision being made. There is no villain, no blatant carelessness. There is only one city living its daily life, repeating habits, trusting that tomorrow will be a faithful copy of yesterday. History, however, never chooses moments of chaos to start. She chooses nights like this, silent, common, perfectly normal. London still breathes easy. Without knowing, that time at that very moment has already begun to count differently. If someone had stopped that night to observe London closely, not as a local, but as an outsider, they might have realized that something didn't fit. It was not fear. It wasn't panic. It was something else. A silent accumulation of details too small to scare, but too numerous to ignore. The summer of that year had been dry as few remembered. The wood of the houses, the beams, the roofs, had spent months absorbing heat during the day and returning this heat slowly at night. The buildings, so close to each other, functioned almost like a single flammable body. But this was nothing new. London has always been made of wood. He has always lived like this. The bakeries were still working. Ovens stayed lit until later, pushing the heat into chimneys that no longer had rest. Small sparks escaped, almost invisible against the dark sky. Nothing unusual, nothing that justified concern. Those who live in London learn from an early age that smoke is part of the landscape. The wind was also there, not strong, non-aggressive, just constant. A patient wind, crossing narrow alleys, passing between houses glued to each other, finding invisible paths where no one usually looks, It was not a wind that drew attention. It was a wind that went unnoticed precisely because it was common, and perhaps that was the biggest mistake. The sounds of the city change at night. Creaks become more audible. Crackles seem closer. But no one associates this with danger. Old houses make noise, they always have. London creaks, crackles, sighs. It's almost as if the city has a breath of its own. Someone smells smoke and thinks it comes from the house next door. Another believes it is from the oven of a distant bakery. Another doesn't even notice. The human brain is an expert at normalizing what it sees every day. When something is repeated, it ceases to be a threat. There are no meetings. There are no alerts. There are no urgent decisions being postponed. There is only the collective confidence that if something really was wrong, someone would notice, someone would warn you, someone would do something. But no one does, because the signs don't come together. They arrive scattered, disconnected, diluted in everyday life. Each person sees only a fragment that is too small to cause a reaction. Nobody sees the whole. No one sees the whole picture. The city continues to function on autopilot, guided by old habits, by inherited certainties, by a comfortable sense of continuity. London has faced plagues, wars, crises. He survived everything. Why would this night be any different? This silent thought spreads unspoken, an invisible agreement between all. Nothing will happen. Nothing is happening. And while London is convinced of this, the details are still there. The accumulated heat, the constant wind, the wood dried out. The chimneys are still warm. Small isolated elements that, on their own, mean nothing. History likes exactly that. She doesn't need a big mistake. She just needs no one to put the pieces together. And that night, London sleeps, believing that it is in control, when in fact, it is no longer so. Now, imagine that you are there, not as someone who knows the future, but as someone who lives in that exact instant. The dawn progresses slowly, almost carefully, as if he didn't want to wake anyone up. The silence is not absolute. It is punctuated by small sounds that only exist when the city sleeps. A distant creak, the wind passing through a narrow alley, the dry crack of an old beam adjusting to the cold of the night. None of this causes fear. On the contrary, these sounds are reassuring. They are proof that everything is working as it always has. The last lights go out. The streets are empty. London rests on its own certainties. There is a quiet confidence in the air, almost palpable. The belief that the city is too big, too old, too experienced to be surprised. This is the most fragile moment of all, because there are only 10 minutes left for the story to change direction, and no one knows that. If you walk down those streets now, you'd see motionless houses, closed doors, dark windows. He would see an entire city slumbered. There is no visible sign of danger. There is no rush. There is no obvious omen. Just normality, and that's what makes it all so disturbing. The story does not begin with shouts. It starts when no one is looking. These 10 minutes are of no importance to those who live them. They seem too ordinary to be remembered. They are forgettable, invisible, disposable minutes, and yet they are the most decisive of all. Inside the houses, people breathe deeply. They dream. They plan the next day. Someone will wake up early to work. Someone thinks about visiting a relative. Someone promises to solve an old problem when the sun rises. Tomorrow still exists in everyone's mind, but history doesn't care about plans. She does not ask permission. She just waits for the right moment. And the right time is almost always when everyone believes that nothing can happen. These 10 minutes carry an invisible weight, a weight that will only be understood later, when everything has changed, when the before and the after finally separate. This is where the timeline folds. There is no possible return from that point, not because something has already happened, but because normality has come to an end without realizing it. The silence that envelops London now is not peace. It is just the last breath of a city that still recognizes itself. Soon, everything will be different. But, at this very moment, no one knows. And perhaps this is what history teaches the most. It is not the great events that define the destiny of a city. are the silent minutes immediately before them. This is London, still intact, still confident, still sleeping. 10 minutes before everything changed forever. If you've come this far, it's because those silent minutes have also hooked you, because somehow you didn't just watch a story, you've been inside it. This channel exists for exactly that, to recreate, with care and historical respect, the moments that are almost never told. Those few minutes when everything still seems normal, but destiny is already in motion. If this kind of historical recreation, told with calm depth and tension, makes sense to you, subscribing to the channel is the simplest way to continue living these stories with me. And if this silence before the change marked you, leave a comment below. It can be something simple, like, I made it to the end, or even what caught your attention the most in these last minutes in London. I read them all. If this connection has happened, the like helps the channel to continue delivering this type of content, not as noise, but as an experience. And before leaving, there is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click on it and stay with me there.